When H.L. Mencken would receive an especially hysterical letter denouncing one of his opinions, he would occasionally reply with a simple one-line statement, "You may be right." Not only was this an immensely logical retort, not only did it meet the biblical counsel, "A soft answer turneth away wrath," but it affirmed Mencken's belief in himself and his position. It takes a great deal of personal security to allow an adversary. Most of us are so insecure that we must convert the world to our belief. The existence of a single non-convert seems a threat. The management of some large business corporations consider the rejection of one resolution in a list of 12 or 15 resolutions to be a vote of no confidence. Would that more had the confidence to say, "You may be right." Such a statement contains no denial of our commitment, nor is it a rejection of our resolve. It is a thorough, ongoing affirmation of another opinion and a declaration that our position is not shaken by another's right to disagree. How many useless arguments we would save, and how many hours of anguish and doubt we would escape if, by the witness of our assurance, we could look into the eyes of our detractors and say, "You may be right." And as an unintentional byproduct, we might open a few closed minds. I'd put money on a bet that there are not 3 people in this room who have had the same religious path from their earliest years in their birth family to the UU Church of Canton. Since my father happened to be the minister of the church of my youth, and we lived in the parish house connected to the church, all things that went on there were part of our daily family life. My brother and I occasionally went down to the rec room under the sanctuary, where we would watch the teenage boys play ping pong and shuffleboard. And I'll bet Duncan was one of them. Duncan Cutter was there. Not everyone present today, has declared this church as their religious home and may be in search of one, or just on a whim came to the door at 3.5 East Main Street today. If you've been coming long enough to feel that this is the church community that fills your own religious needs, I'll bet it's been a path to understanding yourself. While there are former Catholics, Buddhists, Jewish, and Hindus among us, as well as other various Protestant truth seekers, any of whom may still practice teachings and lessons of those faiths of their youth, we are a congregation of individualists. This has made me curious for a long time about the variety of beliefs we might encounter regarding God, sin, and what constitutes a religious life. There will not be consensus among us, but I would go so far as to say that most of us would express similar behaviors and attitudes that define good living and espouse values that reflect a do unto others mentality, regardless of one's theological preference. And folks, I realize that there aren't many thoughts more personal in one's life than our religious beliefs. Those who established this house of worship 200 years ago were likely theists or deists, holding a strong belief in God as Father and guardian of all, to whom prayers could be addressed, sorrow could be shared, and hope or strength could be found. There are many UUs with a strong faith in a benevolent God. The break away from the mainstream Christian theology of the early 1800s came as a response to the judgmental God of orthodoxy and a punitive or at least questionable afterlife. It was replaced by a God figure where the trials and tribulations of life might be received in prayer and met with forgiveness and hope. My first exposure to religious language came from my parents, who led me at about age 4 through my nighttime prayer. It included the words, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. God bless Mommy, Daddy, Tommy, and Squeaky." What were they thinking to suggest to a little Muppet that she might not live to see tomorrow? But it didn't make me think I might die before morning. I guess I didn't take the prayer thing too seriously yet. Perhaps some of you can remember a childhood bedtime prayer. So yes, I was raised in the Universalist tradition, going to Sunday school. The term religious education, or RE, hadn't been mainstreamed yet. We learned Bible stories that exemplified Christian values through stories like the Good Samaritan, the kindness and hope in the Beatitudes in the book of Matthew, and the widely known Golden Rule, which is familiar to most children. The biblical examples were to give positive exemplary direction in our lives. They are all valuable lessons, but easier to read and quote than to live up to sometimes. As is the concept of hope, which I place among the necessities to having a positive outlook, but I have trouble with that one sometimes. I have found you used to be positive thinkers in most ways, acting for the good of humanity and the earth, buoyed by and motivated by love and hope. I like the quote from John Vaillant in his book, Fire Weather, where he says this about hope. Hope is a human construct, a coping mechanism in the face of uncertainty that holds no sway in the natural world. And yet, hope, like fear, is contagious, communicable when expressed by a respected leader. It has the power to create an imaginary zone of protection around a group. Hope, the willpower of positive thinking, is clearly adaptive to human survival. I need to internalize that to be part of my mantra of going forward in this journey. And when have we ever needed more hope than in the present day? Universalism historically presents humankind as well-meaning and benevolent, and this is the prevailing position by most liberal thinkers. But I will admit to having become jaded about human nature, as I actually think there are almost as many unscrupulous bad guys out there as there are those who cared and acted on their beliefs, such as Jesus of Nazareth, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Susan B. Anthony, Greta Thunberg, blood and organ donors, and all those who selflessly put time and effort into improving life for others. I would guess that most UUs feel that goodness prevails in most people. But back to the divine. What became of my childhood God? As I've aged, I sometimes feel rudderless. My parents, who were patient and supportive, are gone now. Health issues emerge, physical challenges raise their ugly heads, and the time behind me is much longer than the time ahead, but I'm fine with that. My theology has gone through many phases, from deist to pantheist to agnostic, and lastly, atheist. I never quite embraced humanism as it smacked of hubris, leaving the rest of creation to the whims of humanity as if an afterthought. But more significantly was my drift away from any theology to focus on living a good life, based on different religious teachings as well as the ones from the Christian Bible that I learned as a child. I've become more introspective as I age. I have plenty of time on my hands for thinking up new religious twists, and I have dropped the God moniker for two immutable forces, Mother Nature and Father Time, which I have elevated to worshipful status. When I stargaze and I know that I may be looking at starlight that has reached the earth after traveling for millions of years from a star that burned out light years before and is just reaching the earth, I feel connected to Father Time. For all the life forms that have survived for millennia, for weather patterns that come without our bidding, for beauty of plant and animal, I feel connected to Mother Nature and Father Time, and these are now my God figures. And so the onward march of days and years, regardless of any feeble human attempt to gain an hour of daylight, is an awesome master, as Father Time and Mother Nature collaborate to rule the galaxies. And that is a fundamental truism beyond argument to me, no matter what name given. So from God to Mother Nature and Father Time, is it superficial or disrespectful of the biblical God experience? Because I've always taken my religion seriously. No 4-year absence from the church experience for me, even during my college years. I needed the contemplative atmosphere of this very sanctuary to contrast the noise and loud music of college weekend reveling. Then at some time in my early adulthood, I saw the great divide between theology and daily practice of professed values. Theology asks nothing of the adherent. It's simply a statement in the belief of a deity. Our religion asks us to live a life based on actions which reflect our words. The Reverend Clint Scott tells us that theologies are the guesses of pundits, a contrivance for dispensing of religion. The practice of one's faith rests in the ethical quality of thought and action, in compassion for suffering, in response to human need, in moral indignation over wrong. And some of that I've not quite lived up to yet. And still there is such beauty in the God talk of the hymns we sing, even today in our revised hymnal. I'm sometimes teary-eyed while singing some of my favorites. They always remind me of my dad, who sang to me often, and of my mother, who was also moved by church hymns. Sacred music, heard and sung mostly in churches, has an emotional power to settle ourselves, raise hopes, give thanks, lift our spirits and bind us, if even for a few moments of singing together. I'm not anti-God. I just don't accept the definition put forth several thousand years ago when it was not known why the rain wouldn't stop, what the big noise in the sky was, with frightening flashes of light that seemed to come from the heavens. Knowledge of the universe has explained so much of that. It's not the mystery it once was. But there are believers for whom God is truly existent and a comfort in difficult times. And the connection is often a spoken prayer. But now, years later, I've given up the prayers of my childhood, but have brought with me the same religious awe of my new God figures, Mother Nature and Father Time, those masters of living and dying and everything in between, of earthly delights and nightmares, explain all I need to know. Not that I understand a lot of it, just that the fundamentalist teaching of an omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent God always left itself open to question and couldn't be supported by evidence or logic in my mind. I guess that's where the concept of faith influences more conservative religions. But it didn't explain why children suffered and died in spite of fervent prayers and promises, or why unscrupulous people got away with illegal and immoral behavior. Wars raged, prayers were not answered, or even why nature itself was often destructive. If a loving God had the power to end misery and answer prayers, why wasn't he or she more benevolent? On this question, I have been reminded by my conservative relatives that God moves in mysterious ways, or I've even heard sometimes the answer is no. It sounds like thought-free repetition, and I don't buy it. All through history, humans needed a label for everything unexplainable. God was the catch-all for the great mysteries of life, death, nature, time, for all the unanswerable questions for which we must have answers. If you were to draw an image of your childhood concept of God and one of the God of your now, would they be different? I accept that Mother Nature and Father Time control what happens beyond human efforts. While science continues to open up worlds of new insight, the awesomeness of the universe remains a mystery to me, and that is as close as I can come to the word God. My renaming of cosmic forces is only meant to clarify in my mind what many people call God. But my ongoing reverence of this life and all that I don't understand about it is as awesome as the word God might be to a fundamentalist or a biblical literalist. And that makes religion, by my thinking, a lifelong driving force, leading me to revere the mundane, embrace new revelations of science and medicine, the unveiling of prior mysteries and the awesome spectacles of nature and time, so much of which were incomprehensible not that long ago. Some religions offer a written and established creed as a guide to practicing obedience and loyalty to their theological position. And many find this comforting as it provides familiar words to describe their church's stance on the central tenets of their faith. I'll bet some of you remember creedal words from a previous church experience. Here, you are on your own, finding your spiritual path and the words to describe it. Each of us is on our own here in that endeavor, but we choose to do it together. On our own and together sounds like a good oxymoron, but it works. So join the journey through uncertainty, perhaps with like-minded companions. We are a diverse group, free thinkers who seek our own truths. God is often part of the equation for many, and that reflects the nature of universalism. Look at the stained glass beauty around you. This is where we came from. That beauty never fades. Some messages are quietly timeless. But for now, I must thank you, Mother Nature, for your unrelenting lessons, and thank you, Father Time, for your endless patience to go on and deny our pleas for eternal life. The sooner we understand the boundaries of reality, the beauty and power of Mother Nature, the limits and the forward marching cadence of Father Time, we can rest in peace when our end comes. Final point, how might an atheist or agnostic pray? And while I have found deep meaning in the prayers I have heard here, I offer this prayer to end today's ramblings on my spiritual journey, which perhaps may never be over. These words express well an approach to prayer that resonates with me. Thoughts from Lawrence McGinty. If to pray is an effort to make me an exception to adversity, if to pray is an attempt to remove the burden of my life from my shoulders, if to pray is seeking to manipulate powers beyond myself, then may I never stoop to pray. But if prayer is trying to conquer suffering in the spirit by which it is met, if prayer is trying to increase my acceptance of the responsibility of my own life, if prayer is the struggle to unfold my own powers, then may I never stop praying. I would pray to live up to these words that I have offered today.